guys, today I thought I would do another video updating you on what I am currently reading. Somehow over the last few weeks I've gotten into reading more than one book at once, and I think it's just because I'm reading such a variety of books at the moment. Firstly, I thought I would give you guys an update on understanding the Victorians, because last time I did an update I just read the introduction, which was very interesting. Now I've read a few chapters, so I've read, there's a chapter on space, which is as in the spaces that people live in and occupy and things like that. And then there's a long section on politics. That one for me was a bit tricky to get through. I'm just not someone who's particularly interested in politics, although the thing that kind of got me through it was the fact that I've been watching the TV show Victoria, the one that has Jenna Coleman in it, and it's about Queen Victoria and her life and her reign. So the first season starts from when she becomes queen at 18 years old or something like that. It was insane, and I've just finished watching the first season of that, and some of the terminology they used for different political parties and things like that, because they have parliament as well as the monarchy, that I was familiar with from watching that TV show. Some of the terms like Tories, I came across that term in this book and I was like, oh, so that's what they are. It kind of made the show make a little more sense to me, so I enjoyed it for that reason. But other than that, politics is just something that I will never be especially interested in. Then there's a section on imperialism, so just where Britain was going. There's a little bit in there about New Zealand, so that was interesting to me. And then there's a section on the economy. Again, not something I'm ever especially interested in, but yeah. And then the next section that I just read is on consumption, which is basically shopping, which is, yeah, now we're getting into the more kind of everyday life, leisure type of stuff that fascinates me. Things were starting to be more mechanized, so I don't know if it's mass produced, I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but it was easier to produce things, so people could buy ready-made clothes instead of just buying the fabric and having clothes made by a tailor. They could just go into a shop and buy a ready-made dress or something instead, which is weird to me because I never thought about that becoming a thing. You kind of just always think you could go buy clothes, but before that time you couldn't. I've just started the chapter on class. I loved the way that it was explained in the beginning of this chapter, and it's really stuck with me because I've never heard anyone explain class differences like this before, and it kind of just makes a lot of sense. And obviously you can define them in different ways, but this is the most simplistic way to look at it. So they said that the upper classes were people who technically didn't really have to work because they had real estate and things like that, land that they were making money off of. And then middle classes were people that were professionals. They were earning a salary, or they were in trade. I think those people were considered middle classes as well, so if you owned a store. And then the lower classes were people that were working for other people, for a wage, so factory workers and things like that. So I just found that a really interesting distinction between the classes, a really simplistic way to explain it. I don't know what the deal is with the author Susie Steinbeck. I don't know where she's from, but the thing that bothers me with that is that she's clearly written this textbook for an American audience, and she's done it in a very condescending way. And I'm not American, but I am offended by the way she's written this book in places, on behalf of Americans. She just says things sometimes that I'm sure that's not the case, and it's just unnecessary to put it in there. I know this book is meant to be for anyone who wants to learn about the Victorians, not necessarily scholars and things like that. So it's, you know, being written in a simplistic kind of style, but I think you can do a simplistic textbook or non-fiction book without putting in these little condescending asides. For example, she'll say things like, oh, this is hard for Americans in our modern society to understand, but this is the way Victorians did this thing. And it's just, why put that in there? Why say that? And it's always around things that I'm like I said, I'm not American, I don't know, like maybe these things are hard for Americans to understand, but like I don't think so. One of them was class, and she had this little spiel about how Americans in modern society find it hard to understand class because we don't really deal with class differences anymore. And I was like, really? I'm pretty sure I've heard Americans use the term working class, middle class. I'm pretty sure that's, I mean, it's not as rigid maybe as it was in the Victorian times, but it's still a thing, and I'm pretty sure Americans wouldn't find it, even if it wasn't a thing, I'm pretty sure Americans wouldn't find it hard to understand. So that bothers me a lot, and there's a lot of that in here. Next is the book that I've started reading for Classics Clique this month, which is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. By the way, if you want to go suggest books for us to read for Classics Clique next month, you can go do that on the Goodreads page now. It's always linked down below. There's been a few suggestions already. I said at the start of this month, I was like, I don't know, I have no ideas for next month. There's just nothing at the top of my list at the moment, but someone, I can't remember who it was, suggested that we should read a children's classic, and I really like the idea of that. That would be really fun. So yeah, if you want to make any suggestions, that's available now. But I've started reading Wuthering Heights. It is, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's very stormy and rainy at the moment. It's very dark, and it's just perfect weather for reading Wuthering Heights. I am really intrigued by this so far, and I don't know what I thought it was. I think I thought that Wuthering Heights, obviously I've read the synopsis now that I have the book, but before that I think I had it in my head that Wuthering Heights was some kind of like romantic tale. And it's actually quite different to what I was expecting, which is exciting. The thing I'm liking about it so far is the way that the story is being told. Even though it's about this woman called Kathy and a guy called Heathcliff, it's not written from either of their points of view. It's written from the point of view of someone who is now Heathcliff's neighbour, and he has moved in, well, neighbour as in like he lives about 4 hours on horseback away. So neighbour, he decides to go visit Heathcliff because he's, you know, this guy's just moved in and thinks, I want to know who this Heathcliff fellow is, I'm going to go make friends with him. So he sets off on horseback for like 4 hours, whatever it is, even though there's a snowstorm coming. So right off the bat, this character who's telling the story, even him, you're kind of like, he must have like a little bit of a screw loose, because who goes to a stranger's house when there's a snowstorm coming just to say hi? Like, it's very weird. So he gets there, and Heathcliff and the other people that are living at Heathcliff's house are not very welcoming, and they kind of let him in because they feel some kind of obligation to, I suppose, but they're very like not friendly. They've got dogs that try and attack the guy and all this crazy stuff, but that's how the story is being told. It's about this man, Mr. Lockwood, finding out who Heathcliff is, and like then kind of digging all the dirt on Heathcliff's past, and that's where the story comes into it, because Mr. Lockwood kind of, you know, scopes out things at the house and then goes home and talks to his housekeeper or something like that. She used to live or work for other people who were at that house, so she is able to tell him a lot of Heathcliff's history and how Kathy fits into it and that kind of thing. So it's basically Mr. Lockwood telling you the story that his housekeeper has told him. So I'm really enjoying that so far. Heathcliff and all of the people associated with him are horrible. They're all very, very toxic characters to one another and to other people. They're just so bitter and unfriendly and nasty and a bit psycho, and yeah, it's insane. They're horrible people. So I'm finding that like really, really interesting, and I want to know all the horrible things that happened, because it's pretty grim, but in like a really like over the top entertaining kind of way. So yeah, loving this one so far. If you've started reading it as well, let me know your thoughts on it so far. The next one that I'm reading is another classic, and it's one that I have to read for one of my classes, and it's Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This is one that I have read in the past twice and don't remember anything that happened in it. I feel like I just had no comprehension of this book. That I think was a combination of it being one, like very dense and quite confusing, but also it just being very dull to me, and I was just disinterested in it. But when I mentioned that I had to read this again for a class, a couple of you guys said that I should watch Apocalypse Now, which I had never seen. I'd heard of it obviously, but I had no idea that it was linked to this book at all, and it's kind of loosely based on this book. It has a different setting, and essentially a different storyline, but it borrows kind of characters from this book and kind of the overarching idea. This book deals with imperialism, I guess, whereas Apocalypse Now deals with I think it's during the Vietnam War and Americans kind of intervening in non-Western societies, so it's kind of similar ideas in that way, and the characters, like I said, are kind of the same. So having watched Apocalypse Now, I watched it just before I started reading this book, I feel much more enthused about this book now. I just feel like I have a grip on it, and I think that's kind of a tip for reading books that you, I don't know, struggle with a little bit. So sometimes it's the case with classics, you just feel like you don't understand what's going on. Sometimes it's best to watch an adaptation or something like that first, or even just look up what the book is about, what happens in the storyline, what the themes are. And even if you're spoiling yourself, I think sometimes with books like this that are really hard to get through, it's best just to do that, because then you know what you're looking for and looking forward to in the book. Because this plot is basically, there's a guy called Marlowe and he's on a boat with some other guys, and he's kind of, they're just sitting around telling stories. So the whole book is Marlowe's story that he's telling to these guys, and it's about Marlowe's past, and he had to go and buy something off this guy called Mr. Kurtz at a different port, but Mr. Kurtz has kind of gone crazy and decided that he's going to be like a god to some of the native people that lived in the area. I think it's set in Africa. So it's that storyline of him firstly travelling on a boat down a river for a long period of time through jungle and things like that, and also his dealings with this guy called Mr. Kurtz, who sounds like a lunatic, to be honest. Knowing that, like knowing what the storyline is and having an indication of what type of character Marlowe is and what type of character Mr. Kurtz is from watching Apocalypse Now, I feel like I am much more interested in this book, and I'm only about 20 pages through. It's not very long. This actually has Heart of Darkness, and then it's got another novella or short story as well. So Heart of Darkness, and then you take out the introduction, is actually not very long at all. It's only like 100 pages. So I'm about 20 pages through at the moment, and I am actually enjoying it. I'm really surprising myself. I just feel much more interested. With classics, especially if you don't know much about them, it can be really hard to figure out what the book's deal is, because the cover doesn't always give much away with classics. Like, you just go into classics thinking they're not about anything, and then it turns out to be like a mystery thriller or something. So I just think, yeah, finding out a bit of background about the book helps a lot, and I'm really enjoying Heart of Darkness. Surprise. The last book that I want to talk about I haven't actually started yet, but it's Henry V by Shakespeare. This is the next play that I'm going to be reading. I've switched up the order. I was intending to read A Midsummer Night's Dream, but the way my course schedule is for that class, I don't need to read A Midsummer Night's Dream until the end of the semester, whereas this one is kind of up next, so better get on top of it. This is one that I also haven't read in the past before. I don't know what it's about. I'm assuming it's about Henry V, who is one of the kings of England, I believe. I don't know anything about him. The only Henry that I know anything about is Henry VIII, the one who exed all of his wives, but I believe it's a history play. I could be wrong. I'm loving these Folger editions. Like I said, I'll make a whole video on them once I've finished all of them, because I'm finding them so helpful. Those are all of the books that I am currently reading. If you've read any of them, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, or if any of them sound good to you, let me know that as well. And make sure you go jump on Classics Click and leave suggestions for which classic you might like to read with us in August. Like I said in my last video, make sure you go follow me on Instagram if you haven't, because I'm revamping that. I've got a whole bunch of new posts and things coming out, and you can also follow me on Twitter and friend me on Goodreads, so you can keep up with what I'm currently reading all of the time. So thank you guys for watching this, and I'll see you with another video in a couple days. Bye.